pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the November 20th Board of Public Affairs meeting. First on the agenda will be to approve the minutes of the November 6th, 2018 meeting. Been presented for that. Seen any additions, corrections?
I move we approve.
Second.
Tom?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is a hearing of public concerns. Seeing none, we'll move on. Next to be the clerk treasurer's report. Laura?
The board's been presented with the clerk treasurer's report for the month ending October 31st, 2018.
See no additions or changes, like to make a motion, we approve.
Second?
Karen?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Next on the agenda will be a presentation of the draft 2019 BMU budget. Kevin?
Thank you. As you mentioned, this is just a presentation. We're not asking the board to take any action on this tonight. We wanted to get it to you so you had some time to think it over, talk about it with folks in the community if you'd like. The timetable then would be that on December the 4th, we would approve it with any recommended changes you have to it. Then it would go to City Council the 17th of December. Is that correct, Lori?
It'll probably be a little bit later in December,
Okay.
Probably around the they haven't set the date, probably around the 27th or 28th.
Okay, all right.
They'll do a special meeting.
But that's
for it.
sort of the schedule for it anyway, just to kind of give you an idea of the timetable. As we did last year, we kind of went through and said, well, what's the mission here, working off of the current mission statement, but you know, the draft that you folks have been working on, I think, follows along with these same principles that we're going to provide reliable service at competitive rates, actively engage our customers, do things that help enhance the quality of life here within the utilities area, and then assist with local economic development efforts. And those are our budget drivers here. You know, if we accomplish that mission with what we're doing here, that's where our money needs to be directed to accomplish those goals. So the process that we use is that we start by projecting the annual revenue for each of the three utilities. We review the staffing requirements, including the 2019 succession planning changes that you folks have seen prior to this. We have budget meetings with each of the superintendents to take a look at the operation and maintenance expense estimates, the planning with that, then the capital improvements. We work with the clerk treasurer's office on updating wage and benefit information, insurance costs, and also our depreciation expenses. And then when we get all of that together, we project the margins for each of the utilities and the fund balance impacts. You may recall from last year, we established a couple of different guidelines on determining an appropriate level of capital improvements. One is the annual depreciation expense for each of the utilities. The second is the annual system asset replacement requirements. And how we calculate that is develop a list of the major system components, determine the number of each of those components out there on our system, what the estimated service life of those components are, the number then to be replaced annually is simple division, what the replacement cost is, and then we use that to calculate the annual replacements budget. So just as an example, you know, we've got over 4,000 wooden poles in our system with an average service life of 40 years. Simple math there means we need to replace approximately 103 poles on an annual basis. When we put the labor, equipment, and materials costs in there, the average cost is a little over $3,000. So if you did 103, it's approximately $313,000 for that budget. But we do that with each of the major system components in each of the three utilities to try to put those costs together. And again, that's a guideline that we use. With electric, I thought it'd be good to again touch on power supply real quickly here. Just for comparison's sake, it wasn't that long ago, 7 years ago, this is what our power supply resources looked like. The Belleville Hydroelectric Project, NIPA, Bryan Power Plant, and the Auglaize. The rest of it was all market power purchases through American Municipal Power. This is what it will look like in 2019. So first of all, you see there's a lot more pieces there, which first of all diversifies our portfolio. So if there's an issue with any one or another, it doesn't impact a major part of the rest of the power supply cost. There are, of course, a lot of renewable projects. If we go up here, these are all hydroelectric there. We've got the Auglaize down here, Bryan Solar Field, Blue Creek Wind, EDI landfill gas. These two are from purchased power contracts that end in 2022 and 2021. So a very much more diversified power supply resource mix. Approximately 30% of our power supply is still market purchases, and that's probably not a bad place to be. You know, market prices right now are pretty low compared to, you know, what they had been in the past. So if we end up needing more energy, we can buy it pretty easily right now. The other side of it, though, is if you had a major industry close and you had less need for electricity, then you just back off on that BP remaining requirements purchase, and you don't have a minimum purchase obligation there. So it gives you some measure of protection either way. So again, looking at that arrangement, diverse resources, they help reduce the power supply cost volatility that we've seen in the past. More environmentally friendly resources. The fact that many of them are relatively new assets helps stabilize our costs for the foreseeable future. And the transition to that more diverse asset-based, environmentally friendly power supply portfolio was accomplished between 2011 and 2019 without significant changes in power supply costs. And this bar graph there shows what those numbers are. And really, when you take a look at what, after the American Electric Power full requirements contract had ended at the end of 2005, you know, we went to almost 6.1 cents per kilowatt hour. And it's kind of flirted around the $60 to $70 mark generally since that time. So the power supply costs have not varied greatly while we have gone from 2011, the first pie chart I showed you, back here to 2018. But the community is much more well positioned on a number of fronts there. When we take a look at power supply costs, they're BMU's single greatest annual expense. If we go back 20 years ago to the AEP contract, 9.14 million annually, or 3.36 cents per kilowatt hour. Last year, 17.714 million, 8.28 cents per kilowatt hour. That's a nearly 100% increase during that time. And the power supply costs represented 83.6% of all electric O&M expenses. So when you're taking a look at places to hopefully be able to save, not that you ignore those smaller pieces of the pie by any means, but the magnitude of that power supply expense makes it a target to really take a look at. Part of that that's caused the increase over the years are the capacity and transmission costs. Next year we're looking at about 4.23 million for capacity and transmission, but you can see where that's projected to go through 2023, nowhere but up, and quite a bit more than what we're paying this year for it. The great news for us is that by having the generating resources that we have, we're able to offset all of those costs and then some. And those credits that we receive are approximately $150,000 for each megawatt we can reduce on an annual basis. So if we can reduce our peak demand during the AEP and PJM system peaks by 1 megawatt, we save $150,000. But we fortunately have a lot more generation than that. So our projected savings next year are $4.67 million. And that's based on the work that Matt and his crew did this year. So that carries on into next year. And you can see that exceeds the 4.23 million capacity and transmission costs. So we're actually not only offsetting those costs that we would have to pay if we didn't have those assets and we're buying all of that power on the market and having it delivered here, but we're actually exceeding that. So it reduces our projected power supply cost by over 2 cents per kilowatt hour. That's a significant difference for our customers. Then we took a look at just the sensitivity analysis of what happens if we hit that peak 100% versus just doing 66% of the peak. And you can see how much of a difference that makes in the cost. Those estimates are based on 27.8 megawatts of peak shaving capability. We actually have approximately 38.5. So we believe that those future costs will be even less than that. But remember, when we were looking at those costs just a couple slides back here, as far as what some of those power supply costs were and where we expect that we're going to be next year. This is just the purchase power costs, but that will be the lowest purchase power cost that we've seen since I think 2005 or 6. So it's pretty significant savings. And that's where we believe, you know, even with the 100%, well, that's 100% of this 27.8 megawatts. If we can get another 10 megawatts, that's another $1.5 million of savings, right? And that's why it's so important when we ask customers to conserve during those peak days, what a difference that makes. The thing that concerns us always is, are all of those generators going to start and be able to provide full output those days? They are electromechanical devices. Failures can occur. So that customer participation gives us some insurance that if something happens there at the power plant and we can't get everything to operate at full output, that we've got some insurance to try to prevent having to pay those capacity and transmission costs for the next year if we miss those peaks. And putting those numbers into dollars, you know, the difference between the 66% and the 100%, there's 835,000, and you can see what it means going out into those future years as those capacity and transmission costs increase. That's a lot of money for the community. And again, that's just with the 27.8 megawatts. So the numbers are even larger than that. I think the board's very familiar with some of the things we're doing. You know, we did advertise for bids for the diesel oxidation catalyst. We hope to have something back for your consideration in the near future. That would add another 2.5 megawatts to our peak shaving capability that we don't currently have. The board also earlier this year authorized Stantec to take a look at some information of updating the turbines and generators there at the Auglaize plant. They are continuing through that process now, and we're waiting to see some of the results there. The other things are things that we've continued to do. We had a much greater participation, I think, reach in the local business and industry peak reduction programs. We put together lists of people in each of the major industries that has to be included to get those alerts. Dawn set up an Alert 86 message so that we could find another means to reach customers and hopefully help with those efforts. So we'll continue taking a look at those next year. I give you this, you've seen this graph before, it's updated through 2017. Just for illustration to see part of the problem that we face when we're taking a look at trying to keep rates low in the face of inflation, and particularly in the cost of those higher power supply expenses. The electric sales have decreased over the last 20 years, and of course decreasing sales and inflation create upward rate pressure. You can see from this table that the residential and commercial rate classes have actually grown during that period. Where the big loss has been is in local industry, and that's down more than 43%. overall, then that is a greater than 30% decrease over the last 20 years. The good news for us this year is that, with the exception of these first couple of months of the year, and this is provided by AMP, they have what the 2017 monthly purchases were by Bryan there, what the 2018 actuals were, and then what they had projected our load to be each of these months. And you can see, with the exception again of maybe these this month here, a couple of them there, 2018 has been greater than 2017, and in most of these cases it's even been greater than what the forecast was for the community. So that's good news. For the first time, at least in the last 6 years, we are looking at positive growth in kilowatt hour sales here. It's through October about 4.39%. Moving on to the budget, to put together the projected revenues, we used the 2017 Utility Financial Solutions Cost of Service Rate Study, Step 2 rates, and then we used actual August 2017 through July 2018 sales data, and that refers to the number of customers, the number of demand units, and kilowatt hour sales to estimate projected revenues for 2019. The board may recall that that 3-year rate plan developed by UFS was overall rate neutral, or revenue neutral. It wasn't designed to generate more dollars, but what the board approved with the first step of it was a plan that would end up moving the rates closer to the cost of service. When the cost of service study was done, it indicated that large industry was paying 6.1% more than their fair share of cost of providing that service. So to try to smooth out those adjustments in the rates to work local industry down more to where they're just covering what their cost is of providing service, UFS developed a 3-year plan. You approved the first year of it. We have taken a look at projecting the revenue based on those actual customer units out there, and we believe that we can move forward with the second phase of that, so we'll bring that for your consideration sometime here in the near future. And so what our recommendation is going to be is that you take a look at adopting that Step 2 either late this year or early next year. And then the budget also includes recovery of some unrecovered 2018 power supply costs. As I mentioned a little bit ago, the AMP purchase power cost for next year is estimated at approximately $52.33 per megawatt hour, or 5.233 cents per kilowatt hour. If we add the power plant, Auglaize, and Bryan solar field costs into there, it's about 6 cents total. And then if we take out the system losses and the free service, because we don't collect any revenue for that, of course, that increases that average cost to $66.70. The rates include $70 for base power supply costs, so what we anticipate is that at some point next year, that power supply cost adjustment will become negative again based on that. The other expenses were based on our actual expenses over the last 4 years and our projected 2018 expenses. So one of the things that we wanted to point out is the way that the city budgets for retirement obligations is that we budget for the retirement payouts of all staff that are eligible to retire in a given year, whether they plan to do that or not. And across the 3 utilities, that's about $400,000 of this budget. So it's not an insignificant amount of money. So when we take a look at the electric revenues, charges for services are generally our rates. It's got a few other things in there too. But the thing that I think I wanted to highlight here for you is that our 2019 projected rate revenue, you can see, is $19.837 million basically, but that's $2.6 million less than we collected last year, and that's in the face of increasing electric sales, more kilowatt hour sales, and the cost that we're going to collect from the community is less. That's primarily due to those reductions in power supply cost. again, that's not an insignificant number for a community of our size. The rest of these things, I don't think there's any particular things I wanted to highlight, unless you have some questions about any of those lines, then I'd certainly be glad to answer them. The rec revenue, renewable energy credits or certificates, is less than it was the last couple of years because the price of those recs has declined. We are actually generating more of them because we have all of the All-Glaze hydroelectric units certified, but the price has decreased from where it was a few years ago. So, on the expense side, here's what really tells the story with purchase power. And you can see the big difference there. Part of that is a couple of contracts that rolled off that were higher cost. Some of it is, well, the biggest reason really is the peak shaving and the credits that we get from that. We did not get 100% of the peaks the year before 2017. We did in 2017 and we did again in 2018. And based on those capacity and transmission numbers that I showed you earlier, you can see how that could impact that cost $1 million, $2 million, more than that in a very short time if we miss some of those peaks. So that's why it's so critical that we do that. We included the 2017 actuals as well as the 2018 budgets because, again, with particularly in the benefits, wage and benefit costs, they all include those retirement obligations. So we wanted to be able to show not only what we're projecting for next year, but also what we projected for this year, because that would have included a certain element of that as well. So when you take a look at these numbers, like here with the power plant, in 2017, the actuals were 1.2 million roughly. The budget last year was 1.8. This year, we're projected to spend 1.9. But part of what's driving that up, in addition to those obligations, and the power plant has a number of folks that are eligible to retire, is some carryover from last year with our capital improvements projects, specifically some of the stuff related to the All-Glaze, what am I trying to say?
The study?
No, the tubes that we put in there to eliminate the vibration, as well as the big things were the carryover for the breakers and relays that we didn't get done last year. So now that we have all of that in a capital improvement fund, we won't have those carryovers in the O&M budget for capital improvements. But, you know, that's where we expect to be this year, and that's what the budget is for next year. Overall, when you take a look at that, again, what we budgeted last year and what we budget or proposing to budget for next year, it's still a decrease there. And we're looking at $3.29 million less than last year when you look to next year. That's a pretty significant decrease. So the projected operating results, when you take the projected revenues and the projected O&M expenses, we have a net projected income of $1.872 million. That will then get transferred into the electric capital reserve fund to fund capital improvements. And the flow of funds there is that the capital improvements are charged to those capital reserve funds. At your last meeting, you created water and communications capital reserve funds as well. So first, we have to pay O&M expenses with any of the revenues that we receive. Debt service next, if there is any debt service. And then any remaining cash is transferred to the capital reserve fund. And of course, if we borrowed money in the future, then those loan proceeds would make their way to the capital reserve fund as well. This is the electric capital improvements proposed budget. Not a lot of difference from last year. If you take out the Daggett substation replacement project, it's a little over $1.8 million. And you may recall when we did the UFS study, they budgeted $2 million a year for capital improvements in that. That was determined again to be an appropriate level for the electric utility, is approximately $1.9 million annually. So when we take a look at the projected operating results for the electric capital reserve fund, here's what we project the beginning balance of the fund will be. This is that 1.872 margin that we showed from the O&M results. Loan proceeds, if we go forward with the Daggett substation replacement, that money we're figuring out it being financed, but of course the board will make that determination if you want to finance all of it, part of it, or none of it. And then that leaves total funds available at over 10 million, projected capital improvements for next year, and you can see we end up just about where we would have started the year. That makes sense? And again, if we take out the Daggett substation replacement, then that's just about where you wanted to be with your annual capital improvements and what your rates are designed to support. Okay. On the water utility side, similar kind of graph there showing the decrease in water sales over the years. Again, like with electric, we're showing through October that our gallons sold has increased 2.29% in the water. And that's welcome relief as well. If you have some increases in those sales, it does certainly help offset some of the inflationary increases that each of these funds face. But when you take a look at over the last 20 years, you can see the decrease is even greater than what it is in the electric fund. On the revenue and expense assumptions for the water, recently adopted the first step of a 4-year water rate plan. That first step becomes effective December 20th. The 2019 revenues are based on the study that Courtney put together for you. Other expenses are based on our historic expenses and projected expenses of next year, and those, as with the electric, include the succession plan and retirement obligations for staff eligible to retire in 2019. So when we take a look at revenues, you can see with the customer sales, which is the rate revenue primarily, where we're projected to be. There's been some increases in that over the last couple of years as water rates have been adjusted despite the declining sales. And so a little bit more money projected for next year than this year. On the expense side, again, when we take a look at what's the budget to budget versus where we think we're going to end up, the numbers are not that much different. A little bit more in 2019 than in 2020, or 2018, I'm sorry. So the projected operating results for the water fund, revenues of 2.243 million, expenses of 2.06 million, projected operating or net revenue $183,000. You do have a debt service payment next year for the South Walnut Street and East South Street water main improvement, 5 years of $55,500. So that leaves $127,960 transferred to the capital improvement fund. And here's where the water fund balance stood as of the end of October. So these are the projected or requested water capital improvements. The big item here is South Town Line Road water main replacement at approximately $750,000. If you take that out, you've got $110,000 with the rest of this. Okay. So if we take a look at the projected operating results for the capital reserve fund, there's our projected beginning balance, what we would transfer next year, loan proceeds. I recommend that you take a look again at borrowing some or part of that $748,000, giving you total available funds of a little over $1 million, capital expenses of $858,000, so you would end the year with just a little bit more than you started. Communications, at least with cable television, very similar to electric and water. We've seen decreases in the number of those customers. Our high was back here in 2006 with 2,500 customers. We're down now to approximately 1,500. So some of that is just a decrease in cable customers nationwide. Some of it is folks that are taking advantage of other options out there. On the internet side, we actually saw a little bit of growth last year. You can see from 2016 to 17, and generally a little bit of growth all along here. Fiber optic customers, a little bit of growth over the years there too. When we take a look at the differences in those different categories from January 1st through the end of October, we've decreased about 40 cable television customers since the first of the year. Only loss of 1 residential internet customer, 10 internet commercial customers, and 1 additional fiber optic customer. So we've held our own much better this year than we have in the past. Some of that I would attribute to the rate decrease that the board approved for the internet earlier this year when it went from $38 to $30, as well as our plan to improve that service in the very near future. So our revenues for communications were based on our projected 2018 revenues. We did include a 2.5% loss of customers in cable end to estimate that. Other expenses were based on actual 2014 to 17 and projected 2018 expenses. Again, includes the succession plan and retirement obligations for all staff eligible to retire in 2019. So when we take a look at the projected revenue, you can see here we're projecting that to be almost flat. Not a lot of change between what we budgeted last year or this year, 2018, and what we're proposing for next year. The tough part for us is knowing that we're going to be offering this new internet service, hopefully still by the end of this year. We don't know how many customers may ultimately end up switching to that service. It will be much faster speed than the current offering, and it will be more expensive than the $30. We'll be bringing a rate to you for your consideration on that in the near future, but not knowing how many folks may end up ultimately switching to that. We were conservative and really just based it on what our revenues were this year. We hope to do much better than that. On the expenses side, you can see there's not a lot of change between what we budgeted this year and what we're budgeting for next year. So when we went into the 2018 budget, the board may recall this, this was I think the only utility that we projected a deficit in last year, or for 2018. And we were projecting about $500,000 total. Where we believe we'll end up is at 161 instead. So we did much better than that. Next year we're projecting a similar loss, but again, we anticipate that our revenues will be more than what we're projecting here. We just don't have a good way to estimate that. We want to be conservative on the low side with our revenues, conservative on the high side with our expenses to try to account for some of that unknown, particularly in this business. The capital improvements budget, there's not a lot of things in here. Similar level to what we budgeted as far as dollars in 2018. And for the capital reserve fund then, we anticipate transferring $125,858 into that, and that would match what our projected capital expenditures are next year. Just to take a look at some of the major proposed capital improvements. You saw this one last year. We're still working towards it. As the board recently approved, I guess at the last meeting, initiating the engineering and design work for this substation. They believe that we'll be able to get this completed in about 12 months. So we'll see how that goes. But the estimated cost is about $3.55 million, including the engineering on it. At the power plant, one of the Westinghouse 191 combustion turbines, this is the one at Lawrence Substation. We're seeking a controls upgrade. This is a circa 1970-71 combustion turbine that the city purchased in 1987 and brought here. And it still has the original electro-pneumatic controls. These are some photographs showing some of the controls there on the control panel. The problem that staff's running into is because of the age of this, many of these system components are obsolete, and it's becoming more and more difficult to find replacement parts. So for the most part, they rely on a used parts inventory that we have in the basement of the power plant to keep these things running. And based on the amount of money these units save us, we really need them to be reliable for us. So what they would propose replacing it with is a PLC-based system. This is what the control panels would look like going forward. This is what the controls themselves would look like. Get rid of the pneumatic piece of that, have it all electronics. But the proposed cost or projected cost of that is about $750,000. We are including $150,000 in the budget to continue working on replacing some of the downtown street lights, like we did on West Butler this year, replacing some of these old steel poles that have overhead electric service with the Acorn style historic lights with underground service. We have 2 blocks on Main Street, I think the 100 block of North Main and the 200 block of South Main, where we have those 1980s vintage square street lights too. So somewhere along the line, that'll all become part of our plan too, to get that all turned over to those Acorn style lights. So we'll keep chipping away at it a little bit every year. On the water side, out on Town Line Road, we've got a 6-inch ductile iron water main that is part of our large diameter transmission loop around the city. So it is a bottleneck on that transmission system. We've also had a number of 16 main breaks there, a few in recent years on there. So we're proposing to replace that with 12-inch PVC next year. That would include 3,743 feet of 12-inch, 7 fire hydrants, 12 valves, and 30 customer service lines. That would eliminate that bottleneck, help ensure reliable service and firefighting capability. The estimated project cost is $675,000. And this map kind of shows you where we're talking about. This is High Street up here, Town Line Road. This is all 6-inch water main right now, till we get down here north of Greystone, south of what is Mayberry Drive extended there. And that would replace that. We've got 12-inch down here, we've got 12-inch up here. So that helps complete that larger diameter water main transmission main. Another one that we're considering is we've got an old 4-inch water main on North Meyer Street between Bryan and Edgerton Streets. We've had about 12 main breaks on that since the 80s. It's about 1,400 feet that we would look at replacing. This would be a similar type project to what you saw on Bryan Street this year, or even the South Walnut Street project, as far as replacing one of those older, small diameter water mains with something more capable of supplying good pressure flow and firefighting capability, and also perhaps finding some lead service lines that we would replace also. The estimated capital cost for that, if we bid it out, is just under $250,000. If our staff does it, the materials alone would be about $115,000. But we've been working with city engineer Bryan on the possibility of applying for a critical infrastructure grant that would allow him to do some roadway improvements as well. So that would be our first preference if we can try to get grant money to cover this. If we can't, then we can take a look at having our folks do it and get it done for about $115,000. And this is a map showing the area impacted, the red here between Edgerton Street and Bryan Street. There's 3 blocks there. And Bryan was looking at improving this 100 block of North Myers, or I guess that's 200 block, I'm sorry, yes. Okay. On the communication side, at your last meeting, you authorized the purchase or advertising for bids for the fiber optic outer ring materials. That's the big project in the communications utility next year. It's the first step in a multi-year plan to rebuild the fiber optic system that's been in service since the late 1990s. Again, the cable will be purchased in 2018, assuming the bids come back reasonably, and the installation would occur next year. The estimated capital materials cost $132,000 this year for the fiber optic and an additional $28,000 next year for attachment hardware and miscellaneous. And this would give us 288 strands of single mode fiber. Our current is, Joe, 60, so it would give us about 4 times the capacity. And this is the fiber that connects our substations and Bechtel Switchyard, the Bryan Industrial and Commercial Park, a lot of the South Main Street businesses, the schools, and all of the city departments. So this is used primarily by the city and some of our larger customers as well as the schools. And with that, I'd be glad to try to take any questions you might have.
A lot of numbers.
A lot of them. I think the good news when I look at it is, first of all, the utilities are in sound financial condition now. They will be in sound financial condition based on this budget at the end of next year too.
Yeah, I was impressed to see some of the good numbers. It makes me feel a lot better about the state that we are in right now.
Kevin, can you comment on the growth of what you see? I've always, each year, I do the budgets for Ohio Gas Company, and a lot of times we look and figure out, okay, what the growth is, and for example, we may be adding 200, 300 more residential customers and things of that nature. Obviously, in the past, the water went down, obviously, because you mentioned you lost the industrials. On your kilowatts, are you seeing an increase in actual meter usage? Those customers coming up, and if so,
that's a good question. When we take a look at on the electric side, residential is up almost 10% from last year. Commercial is up from 21.7 million to 22.2, and industrial is up about 2 million from 92 to about 94. This is through October, so it's not a full year number, but all 3 customer classes have increased. On the water side, residential has decreased slightly, as well as commercial. Industrial has increased more than 10% through October. And for some reason, free service is down significantly, about a third from what it was last year. So Norm and I were talking about that earlier today. We want to try to take a look and see what's going on there. But that's good news, of course, because it's non-revenue.
So in the budget, you're seeing projected growth in the system.
Well, what we used in the budget, if we're talking about electric, was we based it on what the actual sales were between August of last year and July of this year. So it incorporates some of that growth, but if you recall that bar chart that I showed, the first couple of months of this year were not greater than they were last year. They were actually less. And then it started growing from there. So every month since then, it has been more than what it was in 2017, and in many cases greater than what we projected it was going to be this year. To me, that shows that that's not a weather-related effect. If it only happened in the summer for electric, for example, and then it fell back down, as well as just taking a look at those numbers, it shows that industry is picking up in the community. And Dawn and the mayor and Matt Davis and I have visited nearly 20 of our largest employers this year, and unanimously, well, first of all, nobody said we're cutting jobs or we're backing off shifts.
They're looking for people.
Everybody said, we're looking for people, we want to bring in more equipment. They shared some details with us on that. So we're seeing this growth now, but we believe that it will be continuing into next year based on what we're hearing from these folks. So I believe we're being conservative again in those projections on the electric and water. And with the water, you may recall when John Courtney came and did his presentation, he was decreasing the residential class 0.5% every year over the life of that rate plan, and he kept commercial and industrial at 0 growth. So that's what we're using for next year, 0.5% reduction, even though we've seen some growth this year so far. So again, I think we're being conservative.
So you're conservatively looking, there is growth in the forecast?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that obviously is very important in the sense that it helps contribute to capital cost projects and things of that nature. So that's
And where it also helps, you know, of course, is having more units to spread the fixed costs over.
Sure.
And with power supply in particular, because we have that BP remaining requirements contract, it's significantly less per kilowatt hour than our average cost. So the more load we can add under the BP contract, the cheaper everybody's electric cost gets.
Sure. Spread the fixed cost.
That's correct.
Is there a minimum take volume on that, or is that just
Not on
whatever
the
it is?
BP, no, it's just whatever it is. There's a limit on it that they won't do more than a megawatt load addition at a time.
Okay.
But if we get into that situation, you know, we've discussed that with AMP when we've been discussing potential loads for Bryan Industrial Park North, for example. They can go out and still secure a 5 or 10 year fixed cost power supply contract for us, and it's going to be in the range of that BP remaining requirements contract. That's where the market is right now.
Yeah, I think the increase that you mentioned is justified in the sense that, you know, the economy is not going away. If nothing more, it's going to probably improve. And so we're not going to see a recession like in 2008, which devastated everybody for the most part there. So, so your numbers look very conservative, very, you know, in the sense that maybe it's too conservative, but you want to be that direction versus being a little bit on the high end. So, yeah, I think you guys are in the ballpark from what I see.
Thank you.
I see the budgets are considerably less this year than last year, which I'm impressed with. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if I did my math, looks like we're on track to have a budget surplus this year.
In which utility?
Yeah, the whole utility. I'm talking about all the departments.
Well, through the end of October, all of the fund balances had increased,
Okay.
all three. The closest one was communications, which only had a $20,000 roughly margin through October. Water, despite the fact that we transferred $200,000 to the South Walnut Street, East South Street water main project, I think has still got a $100,000 positive margin. So it made up the $200,000 that you transferred, and then has $100,000 on top of that. Electric has increased from 9.2 million to something over 10 million, 10.3 or 4, I think. So yes.
Any other questions? Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. Again,
It's easy to understand.
if you have questions or comments about it in the meantime, please let us know. I know it's a lot for you to digest when you get a document this thick. I'm hoping that the presentation here will help summarize some of it for you and break it down as far as the actual financial positions. But there's a lot of things in there, so please don't hesitate to call or stop by. But our plan then would be to bring that back to you on the 4th, 2 weeks from today. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Next on the agenda is pay the bills.
Move we pay the bills?
Second.
Tom?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Next is comments from BPA and staff. Mr. Iyer.
I need some education here, so maybe you can help me understand. The budget goes here to city council, and the city council gives its approval, and then we come and give our approval, or?
No, what the board will do is, at their next meeting, you will, if you support it, then you adopt it and you recommend to
On
council.
December 4th.
Yes, that
Okay.
they adopt it. So then they will act on it, as Lori said, later on in December. I did meet last week with the council's finance committee to go over this budget. So they have reviewed it as well ahead of time, and the mayor was there as well.
So it's approved by the board and the city council?
Correct.
Okay.
The board would adopt and recommend to city council that it be approved.
And we don't approve the city council budget?
That's correct. It's part of the checks and balances that are established in the city council, or city charter.
Okay. That's all I have.
Well, I was impressed with some of the numbers in there, and happy that Matt and his group, that they were able to do peak shaving and save us millions of dollars. So I'm really proud of everybody's efforts.
It's been a great effort.
Thanks to everybody, all you guys, and your crews.
Tom?
Yeah, good job on the presentation. There's a lot of things to go over, and but you made it more, I guess, easier to understand now when we go and read it. So thank you for that, and thank you for everybody for contributing to that, to the budget. Just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving too,
Thank you.
coming up a couple days.
Yes.
Billy Buster.
No sooner get past that, it'll be Christmas.
I know, food, food, and more food.
Let's get that together.
Yeah. Hey, I'd just like to thank everybody for their hard work, all the department heads, all the employees. I wish you all, everyone, a happy Thanksgiving. Looking forward to, like the Nordberg upgrade, so we can pick up, to help peak shave. And another thing I'm really excited about is I worked on all those pneumatics on GT2, and oh my goodness, headache. And we've just been putting Band-Aids on. I know at first I fought with Matt about that, but because I'm not a technical, but I get it. Here we are, so I'm looking forward to that. And great presentation. You made, I was a little confused about some things I was reading at home, but you made it easy. Thanks.
I apologize to Lori for having to sit through it multiple
Oh,
times.
yeah.
But she's always patient. She
Yeah.
keeps smiling. So
With that, anything?
I don't really have anything to add tonight, other than, I think somewhere along the line here, as we get closer to the end of the year, beginning of next year, we'll take a look at the year in review. And, it's been a wonderful year in so many ways. I feel very good about some of the things that we were able to accomplish with our capital improvements this year, and some of the service enhancements. A lot of exciting things potentially going on next year, both within, that were mentioned in this budget presentation tonight, and outside of that as well. So, all good stuff, and it is really wonderful to be out there talking with some of the community's business leaders and seeing the optimism that they have for Bryan, Ohio. It really is a positive thing across the board. So it's exciting to be a part of that as well. That's all I have.
No, sir.
Or communications, Adam, I just knew you had something to say.
I don't come up here for my phone. I have two things. Earlier this year, August 1st and 2nd, we had the DART team, Downtown Assessment Resource Team, come in from Heritage, Ohio to help us get a better understanding of our downtown strengths, weaknesses, and what our community wish list is. And they will be returning on November 29th. And there will be a community meeting presentation from 5 to 7, and that's going to be held again at the Bryan Moose Family Center. That's the first thing. All are welcome.
And they will
Second-
be bringing us a written report at that same time.
Yes.
Dawn.
Yes. They'll be presenting the report, and hopefully there'll be time for questions. So we're looking forward to seeing what they have to say in their recommendations. Also, I put a memo at your seats. If you would like to review, the BMU team was there to record the community visioning session. So if you want to review that before they return on the 29th, that's available as well. And the public is more than welcome to view that. Additionally, it's posted out on our website and on Facebook. Okay. The second thing that I have is it's that time of year again where we are accepting applications through Wednesday, December 5th. And we've also posted out on the website and Facebook. I have several pamphlets, but any
Dawn, what is this for?
scholarship.
The AM scholarships.
Yes, Lyle B. Wright Scholarship. Anyone who receives residential electric service from the city of Bryan is a senior. There are a couple criteria that they have to be in compliance with, but they're eligible to apply for a $2,500 scholarship through American Municipal Power. So, help spread the word on that. If there's anyone that you might know that might be interested. They do not have to just go to Bryan City Schools. They could be a homeschool student as long as they receive residential service from BMU. Any questions?
Nope. Thanks, Don. I had one more thing, had it on my mind. We're coming up on that time of year when folks need a little help sometimes with their utility bills. Again, we're all trying to raise money for a Good Neighbors Fund, so if you find it in your heart, please donate. And that's all I can say about that. Please donate, give till it hurts, please. And that's it. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Bob?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.